On today's episode, who are the top 5 power forwards in the 2024 NHL Draft? We'll discuss that on today's episode of Locked On NHL Prospects.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this podcast, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday to Friday. I'm Hadi Kalikesh, Director of North American Scouting for Dobber Prospects, joined by Sebastian High, Director of European Scouting and Head Scout for Dobber Prospects. And on today's show, we'll be breaking down the top 5 power forwards in the 2024 NHL Draft. We'll start off with 5 honorable mentions and pick number 5 in our rankings in our first segment, and then in our second segment, we'll be talking about picks 4 and 3 in detail, and then we'll close things off with picks number 2 and number 1 in our final segment. So make sure to stick around to the end to find out who are the top 2 power forwards in the 2024 NHL Draft. Before we get into any of that, though, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can get up to $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Just visit fanduel.com/lockedon to get started. If you are watching on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe. Leave us a comment letting us know what you want us to talk about next and what you think of the episode. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please leave us a rate and review and make sure to make us your first listen of the day. So let's get things started right away here with our list of honorable mentions among power forwards. And we've got a long list of guys to talk through, but you insisted on one particular player that needed to make this honorable mentions list. Talk me through Fyodor Avramov's game.
Yeah, Fyodor Avramov is a 6'3", 190-pound right shot left winger out of Russia who played this season in the MHL, scoring 23 goals and 44 points through 49 games with Kapitan Stupino. This is a player who plays with a ton of violence. He's really raw. He's anything but refined. And the road to the NHL is going to take him at least 4 to 5 years. And he might be a player that makes that jump in his mid-20s rather than his early 20s. So picking him is certainly a bet on patience and raw tools and potential in the long term rather than getting a piece immediately. But the building blocks for a modern power forward are there. He's a really good puck handler. He really imposes himself physically. He leverages every single ounce in his weight to create space for himself. And he's really entertaining. The fun factor is really very, very fun with him. But again, the habits are certainly inconsistent. The defensive implication is inconsistent. But he's enjoyable to watch, and he's certainly a power forward. So I wanted to get him in this list. But talk me through the next player here, a WHLer who has really made his stamp as a clear top 75 name on most boards, and out of the Everett Silvertips, Julius Miettinen.
Absolutely. I'd even argue for top 50. He's been really interesting this year. He's a 6'3", 200-pound left winger. He's played some games at center, but he definitely projects more of a winger for me. The ability to drop the shoulder and drive the net. I mean, we're going to talk about that a lot in this episode. It's basically the crux of being a power forward is, pushing your body to the net regardless of what's in front of you. Miettinen can definitely do that. Once he gets going, his wheels are ridiculous. He doesn't have the best acceleration or agility, but his top speed is absurd. And once he gets going, it's so hard to stop. He's been playing for the Everett Silvertips in the WHL this season, kind of going under the radar because that program isn't really well scouted or well known and doesn't usually kind of churn out high-end talent. But Miettinen is definitely an option for me around the 45 to 50 range. He's got a lot of soft skill as well. He's a good passer. He can shoot the puck really well. He's really heads up, aware of his surroundings, which you don't usually see for a Finnish player playing in the CHL. It usually takes some time to adapt to the shorter ice, to the different scenarios that you see there versus the J20 or J18 leagues in Finland. But he's adapted fairly well and made a name for himself in WHL. That's what makes him so interesting for me, is a combination of that ability to drop the shoulder, drive the net, that ridiculous top speed, and the soft skill that he has in intelligence. It's a great combination of skills. I think he can eventually end up in the middle six doing a fairly good job. There are some hurdles. He's not necessarily the most defensively responsible, not necessarily the type of player you want on the ice with a 1-goal lead, that kind of thing. But he'll create a lot with his size, speed, and skill. Moving on, let's talk about the next prospect on our honorable mentions list, and that is Emil Hemming. He barely missed out on the top 5. I think he could have been in the top 5. There's a lot of value here, and I think the U18 Worlds really solidified him as a first round pick, right?
For sure. I definitely think he is that. He's very young for the draft class. As a June 27th, 06 birthday. He's a 6'2", 194-pound right shot right winger who played almost entirely professional hockey this season with TPS, logging 40 games, 7 goals, and 11 points overall. And in that program, he played very much like a bottom 6, checking energy, defensively responsible role. And in doing so, he really raised his floor as an NHLer. Like, he built out his defensive habits, his off-puck habits, really being able to make an impact in all those 3 zones. So while the actual leveraging of his tools in the offensive zone as a true power forward was not the most consistent this season in terms of lowering the shoulder, driving the net, really liking to have the puck on his stick to like bulldoze it to the high danger areas on his own. There were some flashes of it, and he has the tools to do so more consistently, but the lack of consistency in that regard this season is why he did not crack our top 5. But he's also a wicked goal scorer, excellent shot, very good handler, very good skater, decent enough passer and playmaker. A lot to like here, and definitely of value as soon as like 16th or 17th overall. But for the second to last HM on our board, please talk me through Maxime Massé, the only real power forward coming out of the QMJHL this season.
For sure. Maxime Massé is 6'1", 181 pounds. He's a right shot, right winger. He's been playing with Chicoutimi in the QMJHL. And I think that, even though we've put him down as a power forward, I think that's not all he has to his game. He's a really interesting defensive player. He's improved his awareness and decision-making in transition in the offensive zone. But his power forward elements really shine when he's cycling the puck. He's really good at protecting pucks with his body along the boards, retrieving pucks on the forecheck, and just muscling through defenders. And obviously, the QMJHL is a QMJHL. The level of defending there isn't ideal. But still, he's handling bigger bodies than him and handling them fairly well. So that ability to kind of protect pucks, to shield with his body, put his knee out to protect from stick checks, that kind of thing. The details in his puck protection game are really interesting. You're adding good defensive value here and a player who has a decent shot, not overwhelming, but decent. The playmaking has come a couple steps, but I still think there's a lot of room to grow in that area. But yeah, he's certainly an interesting option for me. Maxime Massé is more than deserving of making this HM list, mainly because of that puck protection skill. But let's close things off on this HM list here with our last player of the HM list, which is Sacha Boisvert. Talk me through Boisvert's game in detail and why he's not in our top 5.
Yeah, so he is a 6'2", listed as a 179-pound left shot center, though I will say he looks significantly heavier than that against USHL competition. Looks a lot closer to 200 than he does to 180. And he plays a really heavy game. He's not the greatest skater in the world, but he's very intelligent, has an absolutely wicked shot, certainly plus level handling ability, but it's the physicality that allows his game to really tick in the offensive zone. He gets the high danger areas. He is not afraid to push off opponents, to initiate contact, to create a little pocket of space for himself. And he doesn't need a lot of space to create in the offensive zone through his hands or his shot. And he's more than capable of creating that space for himself. He's able to force his way to the net front, lower the shoulder, make those certain power forward drives to the net, and was very much on the brink of qualifying for our top 5. But I would say the main reason he isn't in our top 5 is because the player that we have at number 5 was just so clearly needing to be at number 5 and in that top 5 range. So talk me through Beckett Sennecke, who has been a massive late riser on many draft boards.
Yeah, absolutely. And he wasn't a power forward like a year and a half ago. He was 5'10", 160 pounds. He wasn't really using his weight that well, but grew like 5-6 inches over the past year and a half. He's now 6'2", 180 pounds and growing. So he's got room to add some weight. He's got room to kind of fill in that frame. He's still getting used to it, but you can see the glimpses of what he could become, and that's what makes him so interesting. Because I think Sennecke, maybe not right now, is the best power forward or top 5 power forward, but projects as a top 5 power forward in this class. He's starting to use his frame a bit more to protect pucks really well. He's driving around opponents, and we did a whole profile on him earlier on last week. He's such a good improviser, and he's got such great handling skill that when you combine that with his frame, when you combine that with his newfound stride depth and length of stride, you get a player who's really, really difficult to handle in transition. He just always comes up with something to get around you, to push through you, to push across you. Just such a great combination of size and skill there. And, again, a player who still needs to learn how to be proactive rather than reactive, to anticipate play rather than just improvise his way through everything. But I think this is something that'll come with time. He's just getting used to his new frame. And for me, there's a lot of room for growth with Sennecke as a pure power forward. Which is what this ranking is based on. So more than deserving of pick number 5 here. That wraps things up for our first segment. We'll talk about picks number 4 and 3 in detail in our second segment here. But before we get into that, just a quick word from our sponsors at FanDuel.
It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a chance to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, player props, money lines, and far more. I know I'm always a big fan of same-game parlays, which are especially exciting in playoff hockey, and even more so when you're attending an event live. I know that the odds, for instance, for that game 1 in that Florida versus New York Rangers series that's kicking off on Wednesday are looking very interesting, with the Rangers being the favorites to take home that series as the President's Trophy winners who rocked the Carolina Hurricanes in the second round. And visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to make every single playoff shot count. But FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook.
Alrighty, so moving on to our second segment, we'll be talking about picks 4 and 3 in our top 5 2025 in our top 5 2024 NHL Draft Power Forwards rankings. Let's get things started here with number 4, and we've gone with Michael Brandsegg-Nygård, a winger, a Norwegian winger playing in the Allsvenskan, which is Sweden's second division of pro hockey. Talk me through his game, what he's put up in terms of points this season in a pro league, no less, and why he's number 4 on our rankings.
Yeah, so Michael Brandsegg-Nygård is 6'1", 198 pound, and he's a right shot right winger. And he was playing some fantastic hockey all season long in Hockey Allsvenskan there for Mora IK. And the production really started popping off after the World Juniors break. And in the playoffs, he put up 10 points in 12 playoff games against pro competition. And he is really entertaining. He's the best forechecker in this entire draft class, brings a ton of energy, a ton of refinement in his off-puck habits. He's easily a top 3 best defensive forward in this draft class, if not the single best one in that category. And he's a power forward. He drives the net. He's really effective in transition. He's a dangerous goal scorer. He gets those high danger areas and has a wicked tool to really exploit those spots. He uses his hands to open up space for himself. And he, as I mentioned, he gets to the net front, but he can also score from a bumper position. He can score from range. His shot's good enough for that. He's so versatile and adaptable in the offensive zone. And being able to read the game and find creative solutions to it is a bit more of a work in progress, but I really do think that there's a lot of room to grow in that element, and that there's top line complementary upside in this player. He plays so well with higher skill teammates, and he's able to make their lives so much easier because he does all the hard-nosed work. Everything you possibly want in a power forward in Michael Brandsegg-Nygård, but there's still a couple elements here that don't quite make him a top 3 power forward in this draft class, but I still would draft him ahead of a couple players that we have ranked above him in this list. But yeah, I'm a massive fan of this player.
Absolutely. He's a really interesting player. Again, just so defensively responsible. So, I mean, he's one of the highest floor prospects in this draft and could play in the NHL tomorrow. I mean, he maybe not in the best role, but he'd do a better job as a fourth liner than most NHLers today. And now to number 3, we go to Liam Greentree out of the OHL. He's been a really interesting player. He's been playing for the Windsor Spitfires this season. 6'2", 198 pounds. He's a right shot winger. A left shot right winger rather. And he's been really interesting this year. He's been the captain of the Windsor Spitfires, one of only 2 2024 NHL draft eligibles in the entire CHL to have a C on their chest. And he's just been money for them. I mean, at the start of the season, for me, he was more of a shooter than anything else. But as the season's gone on, he's started to use his frame a bit better, but also started to use his playmaking a bit better and just rounded out his game. And there's a reason I had him at 10th overall in April. Just a really interesting prospect. He might slip a tiny bit, but still, there's a lot to love here in Greentree. Another player who loves to drop the shoulder, loves to protect pucks along the boards, plays the boards really, really well, but also really adept at kind of holding onto pucks for a second or two extra, opening up space for his teammates and kind of slipping pucks through defenders to his teammates. He doesn't have the best skating. I think that's the main thing with Greentree. He really needs to improve that skating, get it up to par, and kind of work on the edge work, the agility, and the top speed overall. But if he does, he's got so many different skills that work at his current pace that would work at a higher pace. So if he can reach that higher pace, that higher agility, that higher balance, we're talking about a player who has an NHL frame, who has an NHL shot, who has above average NHL passing and awareness, and is a good defensive player as well. Like, there have been sequences this year in the defensive zone where I've been really, really surprised with his ability to draw players in, to open up space for his opponents. But you've got the prospect page up. What are his point totals looking like this season?
Yeah, so through 64 games, Liam Greentree scored 36 goals, 54 assists for 90 points. That was top in the OHL among draft-eligible scoring in terms of goals. Second place there with just 3 less goals was noted defenseman Zane Parekh. But Liam Greentree was certainly making his mark in terms of production in the OHL. Didn't quite beat out Parekh in terms of overall points because Zane Parekh is absurd offensively. But the production with him was fantastic. And I fully agree with you. I think that this is a very projectable power forward, but he's also just so adaptable and versatile in how he's able to make a difference. He's very much a player who builds play incrementally. He's useful in transition as a player to make a quick, like, one-touch, two-touch play to just progress the play up the ice, even though he's not necessarily a guy that likes to carry the puck up himself. But he finds a way to make a difference in so many little ways that I really appreciate. And while he didn't have the strongest U18 World Championship performance in the world, I definitely think that this is still a player who is a slam dunk top 20 selection. And I know that for you, he's still a slam dunk top 15 guy. So a really interesting player with a ton of power forward upside, super intelligent, and he's also refined his game and diversified his offensive toolkit in a variety of ways this season. So there's a lot to like here, and the leadership qualities as well, right? Like, the list goes on with this player. Yeah,
absolutely. And, beyond just being the leader off the ice and being the captain and speaking up for his team, I think he led his team in points by double digits. Like, it's just absurd stuff.
Significant amount.
I don't have it in front of me right now, but I think it was closer to 20 than 10 even. Like, it was a really wide gap between him and the next player on his list. Just really the scoring leader.
I can tell you the exact number. It is 24 points.
Oh, wow. I mean, this is what we're talking about. This is a player who not only leads off the ice, but also leads on the ice. He doesn't need a supporting cast that's the strongest in order to excel offensively. You can pair him with anyone, and he improves them. He's a player who elevates the skill set of other players, which is something that NHL teams love to see. On top of being a big body, on top of being really skilled, on top of being a really good scorer and really responsible, reliable, effective, you name it. There's a lot of superlatives that apply to this player. I think he's going to generate a lot of buzz at the draft. I think poor-ish U18 Worlds might have bumped his stock down a tiny bit. But overall, there's a lot of qualities here with Greentree, and I think that whichever team goes with him are going to be really happy with the player he turns into, because I don't think it's going to be really that long for him to polish up his skating, to improve his skill a tiny bit. But really, the main concern is his skating. As long as you get a good team on him that has a track record of improving this stuff, you're good to go. But that's our second segment done. We'll get into our third segment where we discuss the top 2 power forwards in the 2024 NHL draft. Stick around to know who that is. just before a quick word from our sponsors here at Locked On NHL Prospects. Alrighty, so let's close things off here with our top 2 power forwards of the 2024 NHL Draft. Let's start at number 2 here with a prospect that you pushed hard for here at 2, and I understand why. There's a lot of qualities here, and you've often described him as your prototypical modern-day power forward, modern-day European power forward. And that is Igor Chernyshov out of, Dynamo Moscow in the KHL, I think?
Precisely,
Dynamo
yes.
Moscow. I got that right. Go for it.
You did indeed. Good job, my friend. So Igor Chernyshov is a 6'2", 196-pound right shot left winger who played most of the season in the KHL. Through 34 KHL games, he put up 3 goals, 1 assist, 4 points. Production doesn't jump off the charts. In the MHL against junior competition, however, he logged 13 goals, 15 assists for 28 points through 22 games. So production was a lot stronger against junior competition, obviously. But I will add, he played excellent hockey against KHL competition, but his role played a really distinct part in his production here. He was a shutdown defensive winger who specialized in also breaking the puck up the ice with control. In terms of refined defensive forwards in this draft class, there are 3 players that for me are very much at the top of that list, and they're all European-based. It is Michael Brandsegg-Nygård, clear at number 1, and then Igor Chernyshov and Konsta Helenius fighting for that second overall spot in terms of refined defensive, impactful forwards. And he was just so consistent in getting into the dangerous passing lanes, applying pressure, there being a really intricate sense of timing too when he does apply that pressure, not getting himself out of position and really playing in a defensive structure very, very well. In transition, he breaks up the puck. He breaks the puck up into the neutral zone with ease. He uses his plus-level mobility and high-end handling ability to retain that possession, and he plays a really good link-up game in that build-up in the rush. And offensively, he gets the net front. He uses his physicality, his strength, and his mobility, and his high-end handling to really get to those high-danger areas to protect the puck. I think that the puck protection upside with this player is sky high. And as you mentioned, I think he's a prototypical modern European power forward in the stylistic mold of the Yuri Slafkovskys and Mikko Rantanens of the world, with a heavier lean towards goal scoring than playmaking than with the other 2 guys, and with a lower ceiling certainly as well, has to be mentioned here. But I think that the upside is still significantly high in this player, and I've adored every single viewing I've had of him. He's not a consensus top 15 guy, but he's been in that range for me all season long. And I think if he slips into that like 20, 25, 30 range, that a team is going to get a massive swing on a player in a profile that's not usually available in that range of the draft, especially with the level of polish in his defensive and transition and off-puck game.
Yeah, Igor Chernyshov, welcome to the Carolina Hurricanes. Alrighty, let's move on to number 1 here on our list, and that is going to be, no surprise, it is Cayden Lindstrom, the towering 6'3", 200-pound center playing for the Medicine Hat Tigers in the WHL. What a player. He's been top 3 to top 5 for me all year. There hasn't been much divergence there. It took some time for NHL, for other scouting teams to catch up. He was in the 20s at some point on a lot of rankings at the start of the year. The highest I'd seen him at one point was maybe like 8 or 9. But as the season's gone on, he's just climbed up and up and up. And teams finally, other scouting teams finally kind of reached a consensus that Cayden Lindstrom is probably going to be a top 10 pick in the 2024 NHL draft, more likely top 5 pick. In terms of skill, the combination of size and skill with Lindstrom is ridiculous. He has amazing skating for his size. He's got a fantastic shot, a really powerful and accurate shot from anywhere, but especially from around the net. His ability to kind of blend his awareness into his positioning is really good. He's constantly in the right pockets, constantly hitting spots where he can shoot the puck quickly and accurately. Works the boards really well, but what makes him really interesting for me above all is a combination of him being a really good person on the ice and an absolute pest to play against. He's a really good person off the ice and an absolute pest to be around on the ice. you don't want to come up against Lindstrom. He is, for lack of better words, a prick. Like he will spear you in the ribs after whistles. He'll give you cheap shots. He'll get in fights. He'll just make it really difficult for you to just get in there and do your job. So in terms of that mindset, just that ability to turn it on mentally when he's on the ice, that competitive spirit, I think is going to get a lot of teams sold on him. And I would be very shocked if he exits the top 5. Like that would be absolutely shocking to me. And yeah, we're talking about a prospect who, again, just, I mean, that size with that quality, that skill, that intelligence, he's still a very raw prospect in the sense that he still needs to improve his decision making. I think that his positioning also needs some work as well. The kind of more mature details that you see, for example, in a Michael Brandsegg-Nygård or those kind of players, aren't all there with Lindstrom. But that just means he has more runway, because with Lindstrom, I mean, you're talking about a player who gets twice as many puck touches as anyone else in the WHL, per game. And yeah, I mean, I'm not worried about the injuries because of that reason, because he's gone more puck touches than like Carson Wetch or, any other WHLer. So yeah, there's a lot to love with Lindstrom here. I think that overall you're talking about a player who more than deserves a top 5 pick. And given the tendency of NHL teams to prefer size, to prefer grit, to prefer character and skill, he's right up the alley of every NHL team in the league. Like, this is exactly the type of player that NHL GMs and coaches dream of, and for good reason. He's going to have a great impact at the NHL level, but it might take him some more time. I think it might take 3 to 4 years before we see him at the NHL level. Just to develop those habits, and just overall, bigger players tend to take longer to make the NHL. Above a certain height and below a certain height, you take about 3 to 4 to 5 years usually to see the NHL. But as soon as Cayden Lindstrom learns those habits, turns those puck touches into meaningful learning opportunities for himself on the ice for Medicine Hat, we're talking about a top 6 center for sure, with the upside to be a bona fide top line player. There's a lot to love here with Lindstrom. Do you have any final thoughts on Lindstrom before we close things off?
He's awesome. I mean, obviously there were some injury things going on this season, so we didn't get into that many games, but the amount of puck touches he had still probably beat out a lot of other top WHL draft eligibles in terms of total puck touches this season, despite only getting into 32 games. And in those games, he scored 27 goals, 46 points. Production's fantastic. His development curve, I think, is very promising. The way he's been able to diversify his offensive game, the intelligence he's able to apply, and the solutions he finds to complex problems offensively is really promising to me. The fact that he is, yes, very physical, very gritty, very violent, but has so much beyond just those confines. I don't think he's a player that's going to get shoehorned into any one role, but has so many different strengths that could make him that really dynamic top 6 offensive piece. This is a very fun power forward, and I fully concur. Quite clearly the top power forward eligible for the 2024 NHL draft.
For sure. And if you're wondering where TJ Ginla is, we didn't consider him a power forward. It didn't really seem fair to him to put him in this list. He's a really good board battler. He's a really projectable and intelligent player, but I don't think he's a power forward as in the pure sense of the term, whereas Cayden Lindstrom is. Same goes for Cole Eiserman. He is 6 foot, 196 pounds, but he's not a power forward. That's just not his game. He's a shooter. He's a scorer. He's a pure net finder. He's not a drive the net, lower the shoulder type of guy. So those are the 2 guys I think could have made the list, arguably, but because of their style, I don't think it was fair to put them in this power forwards list. But that's our top 5 power forwards and 5 honorable mentions. That is our episode. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe. Let us know in the comments what you thought of the episode. If you think there's any players we should have included that we didn't, leave them down below. If you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, make sure to make us your first listen of the day and leave us a rate and review. For your second listen of the day, don't forget to check out Locked On Sports Today. They've got YouTube's first 24/7 sports news channel over on the YouTube channel there. And make sure to tune in for our next shows as we continue our prospect coverage for the month of May. This has been Hattie Kalakash with Sebastian High, and we hope you tune in next time.